Hello everybody, welcome to my deadlift tutorial. If you haven't already watched my squat tutorial, please go back and make sure that you watch that, as a lot of the fundamentals that go into squatting are also going to be similar to the deadlift. Now the deadlift tutorial today should not be quite as long because of the squat, but there are some unique differences within the deadlift. So I'm going to talk specifically about the primary two variations, which would be our sumo and our classical style deadlift. So let's get started. Okay, for the first thing we're going to talk about is the feet. Notice that I am barefoot right now, and actually the majority of the time that I am deadlifting, I actually prefer to be barefoot. Now, here's why. When I am trying to deadlift heavy weight off the ground, the shorter distance I have to go, the easier it is. So if I have a big platform on my shoes, then I have to lift the bar that much further from the ground. Also, when I get into my deadlift stance, wherever I'm at for my biomechanics, if I'm elevated, I got to now bend down a little bit further. Now, that might not sound like too big of a deal, and it's really not unless you're trying to be a professional power lifter where every inch matters. Now, the other thing is by changing the biomechanics, it's going to offset some of the pros and the cons of what my body is doing. So another reason I don't like to have shoes on is if they're big and thick. Again, if you watch the squat video, we're talking about how it's not rigid. A deadlift is such a ground-based, powerful exercise that I want to be rooted into the ground. And if you think about it, when I'm in position, I'm ready to start my pull, I'm not thinking about lifting the weight off the ground. I am literally thinking I am trying to push the entire earth away, and I'm so locked in with everything. My body, the ground, the bar, the weight, everything moves as one. So if I'm pushing the ground away and the ground doesn't move, where am I going to go? I'm going to go up in the opposite direction. So the more rooted I can feel into the ground, the better. So barefoot is number one. If you need shoes, then like a barefoot type of shoe. At the very least, maybe a Chuck Taylor, something that has a really flat, solid surface that I can press against. Definitely no sneakers, tennis shoes, running shoes. They're going to really hinder you in your deadlift performance. The only other possible variation is if you're only doing more of a classical, which is a narrow stance, my knees are going to be more forward, then maybe having a little bit of a heel lift, so like an Olympic lift shoe, that would be the one exception. Other than that, get rid of all the other regular trainer shoes. Unless you're just doing a CrossFit competition, this is the way to go. The other reason I'm going to show you about being barefoot is the mechanics of the feet. I mentioned this slightly in the squat tutorial, the idea of opening the toes, gripping the ground, and then torquing, but I didn't actually show it. So right now, I'm going to show that. I can take my foot, obviously I can splay my toes apart. Not everyone can do that, but side note, good little practice to work on, and you can actually do it and get good with both feet. But the more I can open my toes and grip the ground, it's like a monkey. I'm trying to grab everything. And again, it makes me more rooted into the ground. So as I get in position, I like to walk up to the bar, I'll splay my toes, grip the ground, and then it's like as I'm gripping, I'm gonna torque my foot. When I say torque my foot, I'm doing this. I'm turning my toes towards the outer edge as I grip, and you can see if my foot goes in, my arch goes flat. But as I grip and then I torque, see what happens to my arch? It actually raises up. So on a complete side note, if you're a person that's been told by some podiatrist that you have flat feet and therefore have been told to wear orthotics, it is such old school thinking, and unfortunately podiatrists, not to offend anybody out there, but if your only tool is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. You need to learn how to actually strengthen the arches of your feet so that your muscles are doing their job and the arch can return, because again, it's simply rolling the foot in. Here's a complete side note. If someone's been told they're flat-footed, here is the test. If I'm flat-footed, but I come up on my toes and my arch comes back, guess what? You're not flat-footed, you just have weak arches. So if you now put something underneath those arches to support it, it's like putting a cast on. So when you put a cast on a muscle and it supports that segment, what happens to the muscle? It atrophies, it goes away, it gets weaker, because everything with the human body is use it or lose it. So if I have an orthotic who is supporting me instead of my arches supporting me, what's going to happen to my arches? They just get weaker, making you even more dependent on orthotics. And I guess what? Unless you're wearing your orthotics when you're barefoot, when you're in flip-flops, when you're in your dress shoes, when you're in your high heels, when you're in whatever, guess it's still going to be a problem. So my suggestion, we can do other tutorials on how to actually strengthen your feet. And also know this, most of the fastest people on planet Earth are technically flat-footed. And there's biomechanical reasons for that. So don't let someone tell you you're flat-footed and think that that's a problem. Understand the environment that you're in and understand that we can actually strengthen things. So the only true people who are technically flat-footed are people who start off flat-footed, and when they come up on their toes, their foot stays flat. That is a true flat-footed person. But coming back for this tutorial on squat and deadlift, splay your toes, grip the ground, torque. Again, I'm doing this. My heel isn't, I'm not actually moving my feet. It's just gripping and turning. But that idea of gripping and turning, what does it do? It pushes my knees out and it allows me to activate my glutes. Now, if you've ever done or worked with someone in ballet, you hopefully have learned that your ankle strength and stability from a neurological standpoint actually starts from glute activation. So, real quick demo here. If I'm a ballet person and I'm in first position and I releve up on my toes, if I relax my glutes, I can stay on my toes, but my ankles are kind of wobbly. Now watch, the moment I activate my glutes, boom, everything gets solid and rigid. So understand that if you've been a person that says, oh, I got weak ankles, you're spraining your ankles all the time, it's not just the ankles and the muscles around the ankles that could potentially be weak, but it can also be a neurological issue where the glutes aren't active, and therefore it's creating a pathway where the ankles are less stable. Remember, your body is always trying to find stability. So if I'm picking up a heavy weight and I have any joint that is unstable, neurologically speaking, my brain's gonna go, I'm afraid, I don't know if I can do this, therefore it shuts things down, and your display is, I can't pick up the weight, or I'm not as strong. But if I change just some of these things, if I teach you how to make your back rigid, if I teach you how to breathe and brace appropriately, immediately your brain goes, my spine feels better, I feel stronger. So all of a sudden it allows you to pick up the weight, and all of a sudden the weight that you couldn't do, you can now do, and everyone goes, oh, he got stronger. Did you physically get stronger, or did I just make you more efficient? That's always the key first. So even your grip in your feet, torquing your feet, allowing your knees to open up so that you can get better glute activation immediately makes you stronger. And another side point, the SI joint back here where your sacrum attaches to your pelvis, that is a prime area where there's a ton of neurological signaling because your brain, your central nervous system, your spinal cord goes through that area and then comes down your legs. So any force that's being transmitted from your lower body to your upper body or vice versa, there's a lot of information that is sent through that area. Well, guess what? You've got really strong ligaments that support the SI joint, but you actually have no actual muscle that crosses the SI joint. Again, from my sacrum to my tailbone, no muscle is actually going this direction. All the muscles either come from my spine down to my pelvis or from my femurs up into, again, my pelvis, my spine, and you have other intramuscles within the pelvis, but nothing across there. What does that mean? It means that that SI joint is not supported by any direct musculature, but only indirectly, with your glutes being one of the primary indirect muscles to support the SI. But if the SI has some laxity, your brain goes, I don't like how that feels, so again, it shuts it down. With your nervous system, it'd be like this. If you can squat 600 pounds, but someone doesn't like you and they put a sharp tack in the bottom of your shoe, you go to squat, you step on the tack, what happens? Brain goes, ow, I don't want to keep applying force, shut off muscles, you collapse, guess what? I can't squat anymore. had nothing to do with strength, had everything to do with your brain's interpretation of stimulus, that it then said, I don't like it, so it creates a negative compensation. If you understand all this, this is how I get my athletes to perform at a much higher level. This is how we come back from injuries much faster, because I'm not just dealing with the physical side of training and rehab, I'm dealing with the neurological, which is like saying you have an engine in your car that has a lot of horsepower, but you have no keys to the car. Guess what? That car doesn't go anywhere. So what's more important? It's not that one's better than the other, it's that you have to have both. I need to have a fast car that's capable, but I also need to have the keys so I can turn it on. If you don't deal with the nervous system, you're not going to deal with anything else. So something as simple as your feet being rooted in the ground can make or break a lift like a squat or a deadlift, and that's why I'm teaching it to you, because no other trainer has to this point. Okay, so I've got my toes spread apart, I'm gripping the ground, I'm torquing, knees are out, my glutes are active. Okay, that's going to be number one. Next, when I get into position, I'm going to make sure my pelvis is in the right position, just like the squat tutorial. Again, that's why I want you to go back. I don't want to take the time again to talk about the pelvic position and the breath and the head position. That's all going to be neutral. But just like in the squat, I need to make sure my back is not rounding. I need to make sure it's locked in like a 2x4, which is why, again, we're going to talk about the lat activation, which keeps my upper back from rounding too much. Okay, now we can get into a whole more advanced conversation on like high-level power lifters that allow, because it actually shortens the distance, but they're still not allowing it to bend through the motion. So if I start maybe a little more rounded, they're still locked in. That's the difference. So don't make that mistake. But for my typical people, we need to lock in the lats, make sure the thoracic is not rounding so that we're not hurting anything, and the brain goes, that feels good, we feel solid, we feel strong, which will allow me to pick up more weight. Let me quickly segment to why are we even doing a deadlift? Because if you're more into aesthetics, you may be thinking, well, Chris, it's a total body exercise, but I don't know if it's really helping me in terms of making me have a better quad, whatever. Well, it's a total body. It's going to teach you how to heighten your nervous system, and it's so much of a big bang for your buck. Because remember, when it comes to metabolism, the key to weight management, we got to increase our muscle metabolism. And so the bigger exercises where I can use so many muscles, it's a big bang for your buck in terms of time, number one. If you don't have 3 hours a day to spend in the gym, we want to maximize our exercises. This is a great way to get total body stronger, because if I can get your body just stronger in general, when it comes time to do more of a specific exercise for hypertrophy or muscle toning or those kinds of things, you can put more into that exercise and therefore get more out of it. So this becomes a foundational exercise. On top of that, you've heard me say, I want to get you back to being a human being first. And if you had to ask me, what was the very first exercise ever invented on the planet? I would have to say it's the deadlift. The first time cavemen go is pick up rock. That was a deadlift. So everyone should be able to do this. Whether you want to become a professional power lifter or not, that's irrelevant. But we want to make sure that the fundamentals of this exercise are there, because if I can squat correctly, if I can deadlift, if I can bench, if I can do pulls correctly, which we'll go into in the next video, if I can breathe, sit, stand, walk, guess what? There isn't anything else that you can do. All right, let's now get into deadlift form. I'm going to first start with what we call the Sumo deadlift, and that's going to be our wide stance deadlift. And the reason I'm going to start you here is because most people tend to have more of that quad dominant position. So you've got a decent amount of quad development already, but what is lacking is glutes and hamstrings and back strength. So I like to start with this just to bring up your weaknesses, and then we can go back to more of a classical deadlift if we want to, based on what the goals we're trying to do. So with my Sumo deadlift, the first thing I want to do is I want to get nice and wide. And again, if you go back to the squat tutorial I have talked about, you don't have to worry about your toes. Why? Because if I start narrow and I open up my hips and put my foot down, just like you watch sumo guys, what do they do? Ha, ha. They just open up their hips, but everything is straight. My feet, my knees, my hips are all in a straight line. So if I'm narrow, my feet are forward. The more I open up my hips, the more my toes go out. So I'm gonna find that position that's nice and wide, kind of stretch out my adductors and groin a little bit. And then what I like to do is I will walk up to the bar, or like this bar kind of rolled away from me, I'll pull the bar back into me. But I want to start with my shins, in essence, touching the bar. Okay, this is going to keep the bar underneath me. If the bar rolls away, it's going to pull me forward. So when you look at me from the side angle, you're going to see that the bar tries to move in a straight line. If it comes back and forward, then that's going to be a problem, because we want to make sure that as everything stays in a straight line, my mechanics aren't throwing it off, which will make me inefficient. So we start with the bar right at the shins. Now I'm going to get my grip. All right, you've probably seen people that do what's called an alternating grip, one hand over, one hand under. That's the mechanical advantage, because as we get to heavier weights, my thumb becomes a limiting factor. I've got 4 fingers to grip, but I only got 1 thumb. So if I'm doing an overhand grip, that bar wants to rip out through right there. But I have 4 fingers to my 1 thumb. So if I alternate, now it's kind of 4 on 4, which gives you a little bit of a mechanical advantage. The problem with this is that even that gives me a slight shift in my torso, and it's going to change what it's doing to my arms. So here's my suggestion, and I suggest this too for my power lifters. We're going to start with a double overhand, because number one, it's going to work on my grip strength. That there's nothing wrong with grip strength. Matter of fact, if you look at aging, there's a correlation between weaker grip strength and aging factors. So it's great to have a good, strong grip. So I'm going to start with a double overhand grip. Now, more advanced for my power lifters, if you're going to compete or you don't get to wear straps, and if you still want to sit with a double overhand, we do what's called a hook grip, which is where I'm actually pinching my thumb, so my thumb can't go out there. Problem is, it's really painful on the thumb, and you got to build up a tolerance to that. For most of my lifters, don't worry about it. Why? Because your goal is not to be a professional power lifter. Your goal is just to get better, stronger, and therefore better aesthetics. So I'm going to start with my overhand grip until my grip becomes the limiting factor, and then for my heavier sets, I'm going to switch to lifting straps, which do the same thing and allow me to not worry about my grip, and I can still pick up heavier weights. But I can do so with a double overhand, so I don't have the imbalance of a alternating grip that a power lifter might use because they can't wear the straps, and they can be stronger in terms of a grip. All right, so with that, we're going to go with the double overhand grip. To do that, if I raise my arms up here and I just come straight down to the bar, as long as I'm centered on the bar, that's going to be my grip position. Because if I bring my hands out here, I've lost a little bit of mechanical advantage. If I'm too far in, too far out. So think of your arms like if I were driving across the Golden Gate Bridge. You don't see wires doing all this, right? They go straight down because that is the greatest strength of the line of pull. You wouldn't see it at an angle, and I don't want my arms at an angle either. But then you're thinking, okay, well on my bar, well maybe I don't have knurling there. Yes, it's nice if I can grab the knurling for grip, but that is not as important as the mechanical advantage here. So if my arms are up and I drop straight down, wherever that is, and for me, my middle finger is on the edge of the knurl on this particular deadlift bar, it is what it is. Don't worry about it. Just make sure my hands are right here. Now, I like to be facing down to get in position on this, and then I do this checklist in order. So I'm going to show you that from the side so that you can see that. All right, now from the side, I'm going to go out, I'm going to bend down, and I'm just kind of relaxed here. The bar is touching my shins. I've got my grip. But notice here, obviously my shoulders are in front of my hands. So that's not very good mechanical position. Now, if I were to squat super low, you can see now I'm bunched up here. That's not going to be strong. So how do I find that perfect middle? Well, here's how. Just like our squat form, I'm going to get my grip, I'm going to torque, and then imagine if I were to squat. Remember our box squat, how I said break the hips, use the hamstrings to pull down? That's what we're going to do. But again, if you remember from the squat tutorial, if I were doing a leg extension, that brings my chest down, If I wanted my chest up, what did we say? I actually do a leg curl, which brings my hips underneath me, but allows my chest to come up. So watch this here. I'm going to start off by doing my leg extension, just for illustrative purposes. That brought my chest down and my hips back. But watch what happens when I do a leg curl. So I do a leg curl. Do you see how it brought my shoulders back and my hips down, like I'm squatting? That's why the box squat is so important to get your sumo deadlift form. What I'm going to do is, after I lock in my lats and get my breath, I'm going to use those hamstrings to pull my hips down until my shoulders are in direct line. I don't need to go any further than that. Now I'm behind. That's also not good. Again, I am trying to get this bar to move in as straight a line as possible, which means my shoulders and my hands are in a straight line. So the sweet spot here is to use your hamstrings to pull the hips down, which raises your chest up until the shoulders are in a line with the wrist. Then I'm in position to push the earth away and stand up with the bar. Okay, here are some of the precursors though to that. Once I've got my grip and I'm in my relaxed position, first I find my pelvic position that's neutral. Second, I'm going to lock in my lats, boom. Third, I'm going to breathe, right, to support my spine. Again, what is this indicative of? My squat. I came underneath the bar, I found my pelvic, I locked in my lats, I breathed, and then I squatted. So this is no different, you're just in a slightly different position. So once again, I grab the bar, I'm relaxed, my feet are torquing, my knees are out, okay? I find my pelvic position, I lock in my lats, I breathe, now I'm ready. So I pull down, now I'm here, guess what? I'm going to push the floor away with my feet, trying to rip the earth apart. As I do that, that engages my glutes, and just like my squat form, what did we say? I've already pulled, so what happens? My hips come into the squat position, okay? So it's how fast can I get my hips right here, and as my hips come through, my knees naturally lock out. So the only thing that's different is instead of the bar being up here, now the bar's down here. But since the bar's down here, it wants to round my back. So how do I prevent that? I lock in. So imagine, like, remember the old cartoons when, the cartoon character broke every bone of his body, and so they were in the big cast? So imagine I'm in the cast, and all of this just moves as one unit. That's why I want to lock in, so that when my legs push from my waist up through my shoulders down to the bar, everything moves as one. That's why we have to lock in the lats so that I don't get this. That's why I have to breathe to lock in this, and I have to have my pelvic neutral. So this, from here to here, it's like a 2x4. It does not bend. And the arms stay locked in. So I push the ground away, my hips come through, my inner thighs are pulling in together, and I drive my hips in the bar, and I stand up nice and tall. So this is my sumo deadlift. One more time. I've got my stance, wide stance. I bring my shins to the bar, splay my toes, grip, torque. Boom, knees are out, my glutes are locked. Arms out, down to the bar, just making sure I'm equal on the bar. I don't want to be off. So I've got the bar grip now. I'm going to now do what? Pelvis, find my neutral. Lats, lock in my lats. Breath, good. Now, pull, pull, pull. Good, I'm straight line here. My eyes are neutral, so I push the floor away, boom. And again, as I come up, especially as the bar gets past my knees, boom, hips come into the bar. All right, I've done my deadlift up. Two options. If I want to work going down, I can keep my knees open, hips hinge, and again, hamstrings pull, pull, pull to the ground. There's my position, so I can maybe touch and go. Or if we're just working on strength, this would be the time to drop if your gym allows it. I'm not a big fan of gyms who don't allow it. All good professionals. I'm here, boom, I've stood up, so I'm doing it, and I can just let go of the bar. Assuming I'm on a platform and I have bumper plates, then we can reset and start over. So if you're doing like a set of 5, think of it as 5 singles as opposed to an actual just regular set of 5. But if we're working more on aesthetics and bodybuilding, then it is good to get that eccentric because you'll get more back, you'll get more lats, you get more just time under tension. So again, it's not one is right versus the other. It's going to be what is the goal. At first, if we want to just get strong and we want to pile on more weight, focus on the technique to get the bar off the ground because that's way harder than putting the bar back down. However, once we do that, if we want to really work on the eccentric, again, just like my box squat form, if I'm going to squat down, I have to hip hinge, hamstrings pull, 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 and again, I maintain that position. This is our sumo deadlift. All right, now that we've gone over the sumo deadlift, let's now go to the classical deadlift. Now, a lot of power lifters will determine if they're gonna go sumo or classical based on their biomechanics and how much weight they can pull. And they both have pros and cons. In my sumo stance, I'm gonna have more of a glute and adductor type of motion. So if I'm naturally stronger in my posterior chain and in my adductors, this allows me to stay a little bit more upright too, which then puts less pressure on my back. However, if you're a person that has shorter levers, like I've got long legs and a short torso, so I'm more built for sumo deadlifts. But if you have a longer torso and shorter legs, you're gonna be more built for the classical, which is our feet more shoulder width. And you can see that I'm gonna be here, but since I'm in this position, guess what? I'm gonna push more with my quads because I'm doing a leg extension and it's a lot more of the back. So if you have more strong quads and back, and again, if I don't have to squat as much because of shorter legs, you're naturally gonna gravitate more towards this. So if you're trying to be a power lifter, that's gonna be one of the determining factors in what you're gonna do to get good at. However, I still recommend working on your weaknesses, so you wanna do both. But if we're doing this for aesthetics, bodybuilding, that type of thing, and we want to develop more quad and back strength, then we're gonna go more towards a classical. But if we're doing this again for aesthetics or bodybuilding, and we wanna develop more glutes, and we wanna develop more adductors, then stick with your sumo, okay? Those are just some of the trade-offs, but I'm gonna teach you the technique of both. So for my classical, most things are gonna stay roughly the same. The only change is the focus of how I'm pushing. So I'm still gonna bring my shins to the bar. I'm still gonna get my same grip, which is now, notice, outside of my knees, where my sumo, I was inside of my knees. So I'm gonna still do the same grip, and you'll find that because most people in this, it almost turns into more of an RDL, which means I'm gonna actually have less of a knee bend, and I'm really going to pull from my back and then my hamstrings. So I'm not gonna get into too much variation on that in this video, but just know that if I'm working more back and hamstrings, this is also what we're gonna do. So I'm gonna come down, I'm still gonna get my grip, and just like my sumo rule, I'm going to focus on my shoulders being level with my hands. So I just need to, again, use my hamstrings to pull my butt down just to here. Again, if I go too low, now I'm gonna have a problem. I'm gonna be off balance. The other thing that I didn't mention in the sumo is that this idea of pulling down, as my chest comes up, my hands wanna come with it, which maybe you've heard of the term, take the slack out of the bar. And the slack means this. So you can hear that little amount of little bounce that's in the bar when it's unweighted. So as I start to pick the bar up, imagine if the weight's like this and the bar's here, but there's this space. As I pull the bar up, you see it hits first, then it can lift the weight. So as I pull up into the bar, it takes out the slack, and now it creates tension, and it's easier. Just like if I were towing a car, and I've got one car here, but the tow line, if there's slack, this car goes, and what's it gonna do? It's gonna snap and jerk. as opposed to, no, I wanna get it so there's tension, it's tight, and now when this car goes at the same rate. That's what we wanna do with the bar. If I have slack in my arms and I go to pick it up, right, it's gonna jerk. Whereas if I am already create that tension, you can hear that. Now I've got tension in the bar and tension in my arms so that my body is attached, literally from my ground to my body, through my back, through my shoulders, to my hands, to the bar. It now moves as one. So the only thing I have to do from here is push the ground away and stand up with the bar. Whereas if I have slack and I start to push, you can see there's a lot of other things that are gonna go wrong. So at the same time, as I bring my shoulders back by pulling with the hamstrings, that's bringing my chest up, bringing my hands tighter into the bar, taking away this slack, like the car being pulled with the tow rope. Then I'm in position to push the floor away. So just like the sumo, we push the floor away. I'm gonna do the same thing here. Imagine if I'm laying back in a leg press and I push the leg press away, but because there's a seat, my back doesn't move, but the leg press goes away. That is the exact same thing here. The only difference is, instead of my legs going away, the floor is my leg press, but guess what? The leg press doesn't move, so now I go away. That's what's happening with the bar. Okay, so once again, shins to the bar. I'm still gonna splay my toes, grip, and torque, even though I'm in a narrow stance. I got my grip, shoulder width. Okay, I'm gonna grab in order. Pelvis, lats, head neutral. Breathe for my spine. Now, hamstrings pull down, take the slack out. Now I'm ready. I push the floor away, which gets the bar going. As soon as I clear my knees, hips into the bar. Again, I can either hip hinge, pull from the hamstring and down, or I can get up here and I can drop the bar. Again, depending on what we're trying to do. Are we focused more on strength, or do I want all that eccentric work for more tension, for more muscular development? But the technique is what's most important, which is what we just went through on the checklist. One more time, I've got my feet set, sprayed the toes, grip the ground, shin to the bar. I'm gonna get my grip from here, pelvis, lats, head, breath, pull, push the floor away, hips into the bar. Again, if I'm putting it down, hip hinge, pull, 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 bar comes down. When I took my breath in, I held that breath all the way until I'm standing, then I drop the bar or go down, then I get to exhale. This is my classical deadlift position. Hope you enjoyed it.